Right now, there's a fire raging in another corner of the world. In Iran, people have flooded the streets, and it really feels like the breaking point has finally been reached. What we're witnessing could be the single biggest challenge the regime has faced in decades. So let's get right into it. We're going to jump straight into the heart of the crisis to understand the sheer scale of what's happening on the ground. This isn't just some small, isolated event. Nope. This is a nationwide uprising, and the stakes are incredibly high for everyone involved. And the human cost, it's just staggering. Human rights groups are reporting that over 500 protesters have been killed in the clashes. And you have to remember, that's not just a number. It's a terrifying sign of a brutal crackdown that's happening as we speak. At the same time, the Iranian government is claiming that more than 100 of its own security officers have been killed too. Now, look, even if that number is only partially true, it paints a picture of incredibly intense, violent confrontations, really unlike anything Iran has seen in recent memory. So this all leads us to the big question, right? How did it get to this point? Why are millions of people willing to risk their lives out on the streets? Well, to understand that, we've got to look past the headlines and get to the real source of all this desperation. The spark that actually lit this fire wasn't a sudden political scandal or some controversial new law. It was something way more fundamental, something that's been building and building for years, a catastrophic economic collapse. And this is the point you really have to get. For so many Iranians, this isn't about ideology anymore. It's about being able to feed their families. People have been dealing with this crushing hardship for years, and now they've just had enough. I mean, can you even imagine trying to live with an inflation rate that has soared as high as 70%? For over a decade, Iranians have just watched the price of everything, food, gas, rent, just skyrocket while their paychecks stay the same. It's an absolutely impossible situation. And the national currency, the rial, has been in a total freefall. It hit a catastrophic all-time low where a single US dollar was worth 1.4 million rials. For ordinary people, this meant their entire life savings were just wiped out almost overnight. What's really telling is where these protests started. Not in the universities with students, not with political activists. No, they began with the shopkeepers in Tehran's Grand Bazaar. This place is the economic backbone of the entire country. It connects every single social class. So when the bazaar goes on strike, that's a massive signal that everyone is feeling the pain. So faced with this huge nationwide movement, how did the Iranian regime respond? Well, not with talks or concessions, but with a predictable and absolutely brutal playbook that's designed for one thing and one thing only: suppression. It's a classic authoritarian response, really. First, you dismiss the protests, right? You blame them on foreign enemies, like the US and Israel. Second, you discredit the people in the streets. You call them terrorists. And then finally, when none of that works, you try to destroy the movement with raw violence and total information blackouts. And to control the story and stop protesters from organizing, the government just pulled the plug. They initiated a complete nationwide internet shutdown. They even went a step further, using sophisticated tech to try and block satellite services like Starlink. The goal was simple: hide what they were doing from the rest of the world. Now, to really understand the tension here, you have to try and see this situation from the perspective of many Iranians. Because for them, this isn't some simple story of good versus evil. They see themselves as being caught between two incredibly powerful antagonists. And this really captures the impossible spot so many Iranians are in. On one side, you have the oppressive Ayatollah's regime controlling every aspect of their lives. And on the other, you have this long, painful history of US interference in their country, which has left them with a deep distrust of both. And this deep-rooted mistrust, it comes from real history. Back in 1953, a CIA-backed coup got rid of their democratic leader just to control Iran's oil. Then, fast forward to 1979, the revolution that threw out the US-backed king, well, it unfortunately just paved the way for the authoritarian religious leaders who are in power today. It's just a tragic, vicious cycle. So look, the regime has crushed protests before. We all saw it in 2009, again in 2019, and even in 2022 after the death of Mahsa Amini. But there are several reasons to believe that this time, things could be fundamentally different. So what makes this time different? Well, for one, the protests are rooted in economic survival, which makes people far more desperate and a lot harder to silence. Second, the scope is truly nationwide. It's not just in the big cities anymore. Third, the regime itself actually appears weaker after some recent military and diplomatic setbacks. And finally, and this is a big one, out of sheer desperation, some Iranians are actually looking to the US, hoping for an intervention that could finally tip the scales. All of this brings Iran to this incredibly fragile and, frankly, dangerous moment. The country is truly at a crossroads, and the path it takes next is completely up in the air. And there are several huge questions just hanging out there. Will the United States actually intervene? And if they do, what does that even look like? Targeted strikes or something much bigger? Can the regime's brutal tactics actually work one more time? And maybe the most important question of all, is it even possible for the Iranian people to win this fight on their own? The source material we looked at offers this really powerful warning. I mean, recent history in the region, in Iraq, Syria, Libya, has shown when an outside power gets involved in a domestic struggle, the fight for freedom can quickly turn into a geopolitical power grab, a fight over resources. And that leaves us with the final, haunting question. The people of Iran are fighting for their future against a regime they despise. But their biggest challenge might just be ensuring that if and when they win, the revolution truly belongs to them and not to another power just waiting in the wings.